New Nordic.
Weekly jobless claims saw their biggest drop last week in 3 months. The Labor Department says the number of Americans filing for unemployment fell by 19,000 to 241,000. The week before, filings rose to their highest level since June 2023 because of Hurricane Helene and the Boeing machinist strike. Mortgage rates are ticking up once again. Freddie Mac says the average 30-year mortgage rose from 6.3% to 6.4%. It is still lower than it was 1 year ago. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pitching his plan to end the war with Russia to European and NATO leaders.
Zelensky's message to EU leaders and NATO defense ministers.
If we start now and follow the victory plan, we can end this war no later than next year.
But the war isn't going well. The Ukrainian president wants an invitation to join NATO and wants Western-supplied longer-range missiles to be allowed to strike deep into Russia. Few expect anything to happen this side of the U.S. election. Tom Rivers, ABC News at the Foreign Desk.
Layoffs are underway at Meta, specifically staff at WhatsApp and Instagram. Meta says teams are making changes to align with long-term goals. Numbers of people affected weren't disclosed. Residents in parts of New York and Vermont are walking in a winter wonderland. Overnight snowfall brought 12 inches to Mount Mansfield, marking the earliest that a foot of snow has fallen in the higher elevations of Vermont's Green Mountains in 14 years. Dave Packer, ABC News.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KVNU.
I'm Bill Walter, KVNU News. News is brought to you by Logan Extermination. Getting lost or injured in Cache County's 1,173 square miles of land or Logan Ranger District's 430 square miles of forest may not be a daily occurrence, but when it happens, it can be catastrophic. That doesn't even account for the 8.2 square miles of water in Cache County, with the vast range of activities that can be done in the area, from rock climbing, mountain biking, or horseback riding on land, or canoeing, kayaking, water skiing, or other water activities. There are plenty of things that can go wrong. But when somebody gets lost or injured, Cache Valley Search and Rescue is ready to help. Some 40 members of SAR are using electronic bikes, drones in the sky, and water and mapping technologies. They also use GPS and cell phone technology, and others help find, pinpoint, and rescue people in trouble. Sergeant David Welker, the Cache County Sheriff's deputy who oversees SAR, said they meet regularly for training exercises. On a recent Thursday night, they were doing a treasure hunt using a computer mapping program used by first responders worldwide. Using the mapping software also benefits them when they are communicating with family members. It can be a talking point for people on the scene. Welker said GPS tracking devices are not new, but the quality of GPS and public access to them has changed over the years. Most of the volunteers have electric bikes that can get up and down trails when searching for someone or getting to an injured person, and being able to offer first aid. A house fire in Lehigh Wednesday morning was caused by an unattended fryer. According to local officials, the Lehigh Fire Department said they were called to the blaze around 11:15 a.m. The garage was fully involved when fire crews arrived. The homeowners were present at the time of the fire but were not hurt. Firefighters were able to prevent the blaze from spreading from the garage into the rest of the house. However, the interior of the home still sustained some minimal smoke damage. The fire department said it was caused by an unattended fryer. Officials said the family will be assisted by the American Red Cross. And Utah legislators discuss the issue of child abuse and specifically child torture during committee and subcommittee meetings at the Utah State Capitol building. One of the items discussed was child abuse and specifically child torture. The discussion in the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Interim Committee lasted about 45 minutes and focused primarily on the definition of child torture. A bill regarding torture was presented Wednesday after multiple cases in the state garnered significant attention, including the death of 12-year-old Gavin Peterson in West Haven and the children of Ruby Franke in Ivins. According to Washington County Attorney Eric Clark, who presented the bill to the committee, the bill sponsored by Senator Don Ibsen would make child torture a standalone crime and a first-degree felony, whereas right now it's part of the second-degree felony aggravated child abuse. The bill would also impose a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. KVNU weather brought to you by Roof Rescue, dedicated to keeping your home safe and dry. From minor repairs to complete roof replacement, celebrating 10 years of providing watertight peace of mind. Call 435-999-4268 or see roofrescueusa.com. In our forecast for this evening, we do have some rain showers this evening, rain and snow likely after midnight. Little or no accumulation, low around 30. Rain and snow likely in the morning, then a slight chance of rain in the afternoon on Friday. High temperature around 50. And then kind of windy Friday night into early Saturday with some canyon winds out of the east, 20 to 30 miles an hour. Gusts up to 45 miles per hour very early Saturday morning. You can always get more news at CacheValleyDaily.com.
Even though the weather's grown colder, you still have time to have your fruit trees pruned. Logan Extermination says your trees need to be trimmed back in order to achieve success next year. And this is the first step to a bountiful harvest. However, you could do more bad than good if you don't know what you're doing. Save the headache and call Logan Extermination today and get a jump on tree pruning. Prices will vary depending on your needs. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
It all happens here. News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Football is a game of tradition. Aggie fans love the game and prepare for game day at Locker 42 with popular items like Travis Matthews or Cutter and Buck's Aggie logoed polos, Nike women's pullover hoodies, Aggie plush blankets, and Aggie seat cushions. Locker 42's wall of hats is impressive, and they have nearly 50 different beanie styles. Style, comfort, selection. Locker 42 is a store for Aggie fans by Aggie fans.
The annual Cash Businesswomen's Conference is Wednesday, October 23rd at the Riverwoods Conference Center. This year's theme is Ignite Your Potential, Unlock the Leader Within. Keynote speakers are Julie Weber, Director of Leadership Development at Conservice, Elisa Garn, Solution Architect and Subject Matter Expert at SHRM, and Esther Lee Molyneux, Board President of Pause Wellness. The Cash Business Women's Conference is Wednesday, October 23rd at the Riverwoods. Register now at cashchamber.com. That's cashchamber.com.
Hi, this is Chris Wilson at Wilson Motor Company. It's time for our fall clearance sales event. We have a great selection of over 130 new Fords and over 60 Nissans that need to go. All 24 models have closeout pricing. We have rebates up to $9,000 and rates as low as 0% for 72 months. Or we have over 125 pre-owned vehicles to choose from. Now is a great time to buy a new or pre-owned vehicle. Check out our inventory online at wilsonmotor.com. Hurry in, our fall clearance sales event ends soon.
Lying in the park on a beautiful day, sunshine in the grass, and the children play. Sirens passing, fire engine red, someone's house is burning down on a day like this. The evening comes and we're hanging out on the front step and the car goes by with.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. Hour 2 of today's show, Thursday, October 17th. We're already more than halfway through October. It's just mind-blowing to think about. But moving right along here, because we have another special guest. We spent the first hour with Michael Ballum in the studio talking about their Imagine campaign and their goal to raise $3 million to save Utah Festival Opera for the future by December 31st. Details on that at utahfestival.org. Transitioning now back to our candidate spotlights. We've been doing these all week long, and we're hoping to, by the end of next week, have spoken with every candidate in every race here in northern Utah. Fingers crossed. We'll see how that goes. But joining us now, a candidate that is hoping to get your vote in a race that is pretty critical, considering that the future of Utah is being decided right now at the legislative level. Now, that's always the case somewhat, but some of the challenges facing Utah, all of them in one way or another tying back into growth, whether it's water, whether it's housing, whether it's taxation and tax policy, we're always talking about growth in the end. And the decision the legislature makes now will set the tone, the agenda, the quality of life here in Utah for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it is, you hear this all the time, so it sounds almost cliche, but this is a critical point of decision-making for the state of Utah. It really is. So joining us right now, candidate Nancy Huntley. And Nancy, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today. Every candidate spotlight I've done has started this way because politics right now are so weird. And it is no small feat to file, to run, to put yourself out there in the spotlight, to campaign and give up your free time. That is a big deal. And if no one did it, we wouldn't have any choices on our ballots. So thank you for running, first off.
Well, you're very welcome.
And tell us, how's it going? What are you hearing from people out there in Cache Valley?
People are certainly interested in the election and concerned about the election. As you said, there are many concerns about growth and change and how Cache Valley will adapt to it. Housing is a major concern. Child care is a concern. I guess one other thing I'll bring up right away is what drew me to run for office, which isn't just the issues, but this underlying problem of political dysfunction, which prevents us from really getting a good view of the issues, getting a broad perspective on the solutions we would find, and working together to get things done. So I think our problem with political dysfunction is a major hurdle for us, and this is an important election to try to get beyond it.
This is, now you're running for Utah Senate District 2, which is, basically all of Cache Valley except a little sliver at the end, so Wellsville and Hiram. I don't know why they drew the map that way, but this is a time really when, I was looking, ahead of the interview today, I was looking at some of the things that are rumored to be coming in the upcoming legislative session, which, if elected, you would serve in as a representative in the state Senate. And the state Senate's a smaller body than the state house, and so your vote would have more impact there than it may in the House, where it'd be more diluted. But some of the issues, I mean, we're talking water infrastructure and planning. We're talking housing policy, obviously. Tax policy is going to come up. It does every session. And then, of course, the big budget, which every year, a political scientist will tell you a state's budget is a state's priorities list. What we fund now is really what we're saying is going to be important 5 years from now. And this is all going to happen in 45 days of a general session. And Cache Valley is changing so much. We're seeing so much going on around us. And most of it good, some of it, I think unpleasant, but it's growing pains. And we're not unique. Everywhere in the state is dealing with this. How do you, sometimes I look at all this and I think, can we do this? Can we meet the water needs? Can we meet the housing needs? It does take on a sense of impossibility sometimes, reading the headlines.
Well, it may be daunting, but I don't think it's at all impossible. People working together can accomplish almost anything, and working together in the interest of our communities, what could be more motivating in the interest of ourselves and our neighbors? So I think we can solve those. And for water, there are many technology kinds of solutions that are being put in place now, but conservation is something we can easily do more of. We simply have to live with the reality that we're a relatively dry area. Here in northern Cache Valley, we sometimes forget that because it's pretty cushy here. We have quite a lot of water, but our state as a whole is quite dry, and our climate has changed to make it more arid.
Sure.
But of course we can do things. I wouldn't run for office if I didn't believe we could do things. You have to believe in people and our future and our ability to, when the chips are down, step up and care about each other and do things well together.
That is, speaking of people, you spoke recently at the Cache Chamber of Commerce. They hosted a candidate, their Cache Chamber leadership luncheon. They hosted a candidate meet and greet, and you had a chance to speak, and you said in your remarks that one of your focuses as a state senator, if elected, would be community, and you made a connection that I loved because I've been frustrated about this for a while. But you said, paraphrasing you here, but you basically said focusing on community means every time the state legislature is caught up in a national hot button political culture war issue, which seems to be happening more and more and more, that they're not doing the work that they're hired to do by voters. And I 100% believe that. It is frustrating to see, the nationalization of state legislatures for that reason. Because if they're not talking about the things, if they're talking about this national political thing, this culture war issue, they're not talking about our water policy. They're not talking about housing policy. They're not talking about, the needs of the state. And more time goes towards that. How do you combat that?
I guess by just doing it, by walking the walk on talking about real community needs, by reaching out to people, by asking them what their concerns are, by bringing them into the conversation. For the 45-day session is somewhat problematic because it goes by so very fast.
Yeah.
But we perhaps don't need to have 934 bills every year. And some of those nationalized ones, some of the special niche interest ones, perhaps we could leave behind for a little while. We wouldn't be in a housing crisis if we began to worry about housing problems sooner rather than waiting until they were so very pressing. And the same is true with the Great Salt Lake, really. As long as I've lived in Utah, 13 years, we've been talking about the problem of the decline of water flowing into the Great Salt Lake. And it didn't really make it onto the radar screen of political discussion until just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So, pay attention to our local communities, walk the streets with people, bring people into buildings, have more civic conversations, and direct attention to what's really most important to people.
That is, to drive this point home for listeners, I went back and looked because I couldn't remember the year. But I remember here on the show, we talked with an individual from the Utah Climate Center about a study and a report that was put out that showed the dust from the newly exposed lake bed of the Great Salt Lake was, one, toxic, and two, melting our snowpack a lot faster. Because those dust particles settle on the snow, they're darker, they collect just a tiny bit more heat from the sun, and they melt the snow faster. And so I went back and looked. That was 2011 when that research was done at Utah State University, and it was presented to state lawmakers. I do think sometimes we're, as a legislature, they're getting caught up in things that waste their time. So I really appreciate you including that in your campaign because I don't think another candidate is talking about it. You mentioned, the concerns of Utahns and them being addressed by the legislature. What are you hearing from voters as you go out and campaign here in Cache Valley? What are the priority issues for voters?
Housing. Everyone mentions housing. Many people mention childcare. Many people mention transportation. Some people mention climate change and action on that. Water is a common concern. Politicians not listening to people is quite commonly mentioned. sort of the suite of things that matter to communities, many of which, as you pointed out, are especially vulnerable to rapid change and keeping up with rapid change. People are worried about growth and change. They're not anti-growth, but they're concerned with good growth, smart growth, growth that preserves the wonderful beauty and quality of life that we have in Cache Valley, and strong community institutions. People want to know their neighbors. They want to like their neighbors. They want to all feel good together about the way we live here and how well we care for our valley and our community.
Cache Valley is, growing up here, it's a really interesting community because we're big, actually. If you look at other cities and other areas in Utah, we're population-wise and geographically, we're actually kind of on the just above mid-sized city range. But I often laugh when I hear the legislature talk about Cache Valley. They don't know what to call us. I've heard us referred to as rural Utah. I've heard other lawmakers say we're a satellite community of the Wasatch Front. We're just an extension of the Wasatch Front. And sometimes I feel that the legislature's not sure where to put Cache Valley. Maybe it's because of the university. Maybe it's because we have a vibrant economy here that isn't hit as hard during recessions. I don't know. But what would you call us? Because they can't seem to figure it out.
Oh, I don't know. I lived in Minneapolis once a long time ago.
Oh, so you know big
and
cities.
So I know the Minneapolis, what they used to call it. So by comparison with New York City, which they considered a city they wanted to compete with, they were the Minneapolis. So we have a rural feel. I think we just have a lovely community. We're big enough to have all of the cultural amenities one might want to have. I mean, we have excellent arts here.
Sure.
We're very lucky to have that. We have institutions of higher education, technical education, really a great educational infrastructure. We don't feel like a city. We have a lot of the benefits of a city, but we don't feel like a city. And so
you can still
we're not really rural anymore, but it still has that small town feel.
It is, it is kind of a unique thing, and it does, it does kind of play into the decisions about planning and what we want Cache Valley to look like, 10 years from now, because you can still drive past fields full of cows here. But at the same time, we have everything Ogden does. We have everything, and it does sometimes seem to throw a wrench in the legislature's planning. They're not knowing really where to put Cache Valley. Sometimes I feel they ignore us. And that is my next question for you, because it's my primary concern, and it's one we hear from listeners a lot. How do you make sure, as a state senator, Cache Valley's voice gets heard? Because sometimes Utah County, Salt Lake County, that's where everyone lives, they kind of dominate. And whether it's a budget discussion or a water discussion, and they try to steamroll the other areas. How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, numbers-wise, we are smaller than the Wasatch Front, so there will be less representation from up here. I guess speaking up, always not hesitating to speak up, but also listening and making clear that what we want to do is make Utah work for all of us, not only Cache Valley, not only the Wasatch Front, everyone, for all of us. And so encourage keeping that in mind, that our job is to represent the people of the areas that elected us, but not at the expense of everyone else in Utah. We are all part of the state of Utah, and so we work together to make things work for all of us.
Sure. And
treat other people fairly and expect to be treated fairly in return.
That's well said. I like that. The legislature could use more of that. Competition is healthy, but sometimes it seems to get out of hand during that 45-day session. And Nancy Huntley, our guest again, she is a candidate for Utah Senate 2, the 2nd District, which is basically all of Cache Valley, for those listening, and it extends over into Rich as well. Other than a small sliver at the end of the valley, you are currently represented by a state senator who lives in Box Elder County. You're included with Box Elder County. If you want to see that map, by the way, I've linked to it on our Facebook page. You can connect with Nancy a couple of different ways. The best place to start would be her campaign website, which is nancyhuntley.com. And that's spelled, Nancy spelled with a Y, traditional spelling, and Huntly on the last name. And I've linked to that on our Facebook page as well. Nancy has a little bit about herself, priority lists, and more. And Nancy, you've made kind of a slogan of your campaign, the word balance. You say that prioritizing the future for Cache Valley, for Rich County, wherever it might be, we need to have a balance in the legislature that doesn't exist now.
Yeah.
Or doesn't exist enough, I guess, is paraphrasing you, right?
I think that's right. We have a very large single party supermajority. And so I think that limits the voices that are heard, the ideas that are brought to the table, the solutions that are entertained. So having a little more varied perspective represented in the legislature, I think, would be a good idea. It's also important for all who are in the legislature to bring forth all of the voices of their community, not just the people that they think are responsible for electing them, the people they think of as their voters. We're all their voters. We all deserve the attention of each legislator that represents us. I think the idea of balance also refers to paying attention to the range of things that affect communities, not just the emergency of the moment or an idea that for one reason or another is forced upon you. But to remember that healthy communities have lots of things. They have clean environments. They have good transportation systems. They have good housing. They have good education. They have economic opportunity for all. They have opportunity for spiritual and cultural renewal and experiences together. So we need balance. A community with only one of those would not be a very healthy community. So that kind of balance matters also. I think at the moment we need to worry a little bit about attention to balance of powers as well. And I'll just comment that I think we should be concerned about Amendment D, which is no longer on our ballots. It's been voided, but
I still hate voted no. I protest voted no, even though I know it wouldn't count.
Yeah, but we need to ask our legislature to remember to respect the balance of powers in all ways, because that's the foundation of our government and of a free society. Federal-state balance, legislative, executive, judicial balance, and the people versus their elected representatives. So we get in trouble when too much power is located in one place, and balance of power must be respected.
Yeah. That was a very frustrating episode to see. You hear the cliche all the time, they've forgotten who they work for. That's literally what happened with Amendment D. I won't get off on that rant. Listeners are tired of hearing me rant about it, but I appreciate you addressing it in your campaign. And you cite, as a final point here for voters to get to know where you're coming from, I thought this was unique. You cite, when it comes to, obviously in the state legislature, you're going to have and people forget this, but a state lawmaker isn't there just to write bills and get them passed. You're also there to weigh in on hundreds of other bills, the thousands now that are going to come from other lawmakers. And you cite, when asked recently, how you would navigate that, how you would decide where you are. You cite the scientific process. Working as a scientist, you say, it's a simple matter of collecting information and data, as much information as you can. And then, working together to reach a consensus of some kind. I thought that was very unique to use that example that isn't often used as a way to be an effective lawmaker. You bring that to the table. Hypothetical situation for you. There's a bill that pops up. You hate everything about it, but there's one little thing that you like. And you sit down to talk with the sponsor of that bill. What do you say?
Well, there are no details in this example you gave me, so it's a little hard to know. But yeah, if you see positives embedded in negatives, certainly one would want to bring up that valuable idea and perhaps suggest that there's some other things that may not work out as well, but how might we develop this valuable idea to put it to work? Could it become a bill by itself? Are there other bills that perhaps it would be complementary within? I mean, it all depends on the details, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, maybe?
Sure.
They're good ideas buried in even the worst of bills, probably.
Sure.
I mean, they're good intentions embedded in many of the worst of bills.
Yeah.
and It's also sort of a balance across the variety of bills that might be passed in where the positives and the negatives for people are also matters. So you want to be sure that you attend to not leaving some particular group or interest or need out all the time or rewarding one all the time. And it's important that people feel that they're treated fairly, that everyone is considered when the budget priorities are set.
Nancy, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us today. As I told you as we scheduled this, I like to do these. These are fun for me to do, get to know the candidates each cycle, but also I like to think that it reminds people an election's happening, because we do get busy and forget. And for listeners, there's information about registering to vote on Nancy's website as well, nancyhuntley.com again, and I've linked to that on our Facebook page. But it is really important to do. Check your registration as well. If you've voted before and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm registered, make sure your address is correct and more. And do that sooner rather than later, because ballots are already out there. If you need to fix something, your window of time to do that is closing quicker than you think. And the voter registration deadline here in Utah is October 25th. Outside of that, you would have to register in person only on Election Day and wait in a long line to do that. So take care of that now. If you're listening, visit vote.utah.gov or click the register to vote link there at nancyhuntley.com, where you can also learn more about Nancy Huntley, candidate for Utah Senate District 2, representing the majority of Cache Valley and Rich counties. And Nancy, again, thank you for making some time for us today, and thank you for filing to run.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Can I add one thing?
Please.
If you want my email, it should be on my website, but it just disappeared from it once. It's my name, NancyHuntleyUT, so sort of Nancy Huntley, Utah, at gmail.com. And I'm happy to hear from anyone.
Very nice. Nancy Huntley, candidate for Utah Senate 2. More information again at nancyhuntley.com. And thanks to Nancy for her time, to our listeners for your time as well. Stick around. More of For the People to come after this look at the news with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News is brought to you by Cardall's. Mattaway Police Chief Dakota Midkiff has been placed on leave after videos and photos showed his interaction with a 76-year-old man earlier this month. The images from October 5th show Midkiff arresting Rick Schulze, a retired state wildlife officer who was left bruised and bloodied after the incident. A member of the town council confirmed that Midkiff is currently on paid administrative leave while the episode is investigated, but Mattaway officials declined to comment further. According to a jail booking statement, the police chief responded to a family dispute and was questioning the parents about whether they hit a child. One of the parents was Schulze's daughter. When Schulze arrived on scene, Midkiff told him to leave. Moments later, the chief wrote he turned around and allegedly found Schulze yelling at him in the driveway. In the report, Midkiff wrote that Schulze refused to comply with an order to put his hands behind his back, so he decentralized the older man and took him to the ground. Schulze was later booked into the Box Elder County Jail on suspicion of interfering with a peace officer, but has yet to be charged with any crimes. Midkiff previously worked for 3.5 years at the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and 1.5 years with the Wendover Police Department. Midkiff is the city's 4th police chief in Mattaway in 5 years. And a pedestrian was struck and killed in an auto pedestrian crash in Davis County. Police have been searching for the driver who fled the scene. The crash happened just after 8 p.m. Wednesday night near Hillfield Road in Layton. Details about exactly what happened were not available. Sergeant Max Holbrook with the Layton Police Department said the male victim was pronounced dead at the scene. His identity was not released. Officials were looking for an older model van with 2 doors. Holbrook said they believed it had extensive front-end damage with a dangling headlight. The road was closed for just over 4 hours while crews worked at the scene. KVNU weather is brought to you by Logan Extermination. Spiders think they own your home's exterior. Get a full exterior spray today from Logan Extermination. Call 752-8450. For tonight, chance of some rain this evening, then rain and snow likely after midnight. Little or no accumulation, low around 30. Rain and snow likely Friday morning, then a slight chance of rain in the afternoon. Mostly cloudy, high around 50. Some gusty canyon winds kicking in late Friday night, early Saturday morning, gusting up to around 45 miles per hour early on Saturday. Saturday during the day, though, nice and upper 50s by afternoon. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. Celebrations and worry across Israel after the assassination of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. The hero Moor's uncle was an Israeli hostage who died in captivity.
I'm not shedding one single tear for the life of him.
Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th attacks, killed today by Israeli troops in Gaza. A Texas county judge delaying the scheduled execution today of a man who would be the first in the U.S. put to death in a shaken baby syndrome case. Earlier today, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a clemency plea. In La Crosse, Wisconsin,
Election day is in 19 days.
Vice President Kamala Harris barnstorming the battleground state today. President Biden arrived in Germany tomorrow, meetings with European leaders, likely the last of his presidency. Researchers finding that RSV vaccines dramatically reduced ER visits and hospitalizations for Americans over 60 years old who had symptoms of RSV infections over the last year. This is ABC News.
Everyone has been asking me, hey, radio guy, what's the forecast for winter? Well, spoiler alert, it's going to be cold, but there is something you can do. Call Cardall's Insulation. With better insulation, you'll be amazed at how much warmer your home is. Get this, as much as 35% of your home's heat is lost through your walls and attic. And if your home was built before 1980, it's even worse. And right now there's a tax credit up to $1,200 for upgrading your insulation. Call Cardall's Insulation for all the details. 755-5012. That's 755-5012.
From all of us at Tazu Dental, we are honored to be named Gold Winner for Best of Northern Utah of 2024. Thank you to all of our amazing team and patients.
Best of Northern Utah.
Utah's at a crossroads. The surging economy of the last decade is not today's reality. Cache Valley is feeling the effects of rising housing costs, stagnant wages, and skyrocketing energy prices. This is not acceptable, and I know we can do better. I'm Jason Thompson, and as a successful business owner, proven job creator, and experienced city mayor, I know what it takes to ensure that Utah is heading in the right direction. But I can't do it alone. I need your vote this November. At electjasonthompson.com, learn how together we can keep Utah heading in the right direction.
Paid for by the committee to elect Jason Thompson.
Wow, Dave, what's the matter? You don't look so good. You look like you're under a lot of stress.
You're right, Bob. And looks aren't deceiving. I thought turning 65 would be easy. Boy, was I wrong. Every day I go to the mailbox, I'm inundated with mail, bombarded with phone calls from telemarketers, and when I turn on the TV, all I see is Medicare commercials. It's like a bad dream I can't wake up from.
I know how you feel, Dave. I felt the same way.
So what'd you do?
I went to Jessup Insurance. I can't believe the peace of mind they've given me. They've helped me to understand Medicare and explained all of my insurance options. Dave, hey, Dave, where are you going?
I'm heading to Jessup Insurance to get rid of this bad dream.
Say goodbye to all the Medicare confusion. Call Jessup Insurance, 435-213-3200, or Google Jessup Insurance.
Jessup Insurance and Retirement Services. Let us guide you.
I'm Patrick Belmont, and I want to represent you in the Utah legislature. I think it's time to fix our housing problem, invest in our kids' futures, and make sure our economy works for everyone, not just the wealthy few. I want to pull Cache Valley together into a community where everyone can find their place and can achieve a good quality of life.
Make your vote matter. Make your voice heard. Please register to vote today at vote.utah.gov.
I'm Patrick Belmont, and I approve this message. Paid for by Belmont for Utah.
Disasters don't wait for a convenient time. When the unexpected strikes, call the trusted team at Blue Sky. Remember, Blue Sky is that same great ARS team you know and trust.
This is Tom with Blue Sky Restoration. When disaster strikes, whether it's a flood, fire, mold damage, or an unforeseen accident, Blue Sky will clean up, repair, and restore your home or business like it was before. No disaster is too big or too small. For all your restoration needs, you can trust our Blue Sky team.
The Above and Beyond Salute.
Hello?
Jill Beer, this is Will Feelright. We've been trying to get a hold of you.
I know you did. And then somebody texted me and I was like, oh crap, I probably should have answered.
Well, someone nominated you for our Above and Beyond Salute, talking about your compassion, caring, and just how much you love the students and staff there at Hillcrest Elementary. So we thought you could use free lunch to Firehouse Subs.
I love my job and I love what I do, and so...
Well, and people love the job you do. It's obvious.
Thank you, thank you.
The Above and Beyond Salute on News Talk KVNU.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Thanks again to Nancy Huntley and all of our candidates this week for stopping by. No matter what party you belong to or none, if you're unaffiliated, regardless of your political ideology, whether you're progressive left or conservative right or right down the middle as a moderate or a centrist, it's important to have competition. It's important to have choices. I really feel, I've said it a million times on the show, I won't get into it again, but I really feel the arrogance of Amendment D, which shows on your ballot, but because the courts ruled that the legislature basically tried to pull a fast one on you, the voters, which is literally what the courts ruled with deceptive ballot language about what Amendment D would have done. That won't count. Your votes won't count. But as an example, Amendment D is a result of that arrogance that is swept in to the legislature as they've consolidated power from the executive branch, from the judiciary, they even tried to take power from the attorney general. They have taken power from state agencies. They're looking at taking decision-making power away from cities and counties. This is a legislature that has gotten too full of itself. And by legislature, I don't point this necessarily at any one lawmaker. Definitely not any from Cache Valley. Cache Valley lawmakers have, I think, been neutral at least, if not actively pushed against this. But the legislative leadership, the legislative ethos, if you will, has gotten very full of itself. It's sort of a "don't you know who we are" kind of attitude, which we all know that doesn't end well. Whether it's a red state or a blue state, that ends nowhere good for people. It might end up really good for lobbyists or special interests or the lawmakers themselves, but voters don't benefit from that attitude, and we definitely have that attitude. And I think it comes from a lack of competition. Now, I think we're a decade at least, if not two, from that competition coming from Democrats, but it does occasionally pop up in competition between the House and the Senate, which I think is healthy. You'll have the House get all excited about an idea and ram the bill through quickly, and then the Senate will say, voters should probably get a chance to mull that one over more. That's a big change, so we're going to kill that bill. Or vice versa. I've seen the House do it to the Senate as well. That's competition. That's healthy. It doesn't happen enough, unfortunately. Also competition between the lawmakers. I would like to see revived competition between a governor and the legislature. It's one of the few things I liked about the Huntsman years. There were a lot of things I didn't like. Huntsman took it too far. With Huntsman, we had the opposite of what we have now. You still had one branch that was too full of itself, that thought it was, almost divine in its mission. And that was the governor's office under Huntsman. And he walked all over the legislature anytime it benefited him to do so. Sometimes, for good reason as well, to be fair. But his executive office was like what we're seeing from the legislature now. And the pendulum has now swung too much in the other direction, where now the legislature could do with an ego check. elections are the best way to do that. And so again, I'm not saying I personally believe it's 10 years at least before we see areas outside of Salt Lake County going blue or purple even. Although you could make the argument that Weber County is already purple, and there is a big purple area here in Cache Valley, and it happens to be where the majority of people live in the valley as well. So I could be wrong. It could be sooner than that. But let's say 10 years from now is the soonest you could expect to see a healthy competition between the two major political parties. But I think competition that can start happening now is in the Republican primary process. And I hope we see more of that. I hope we see more incumbents primaried, even if the incumbents keep winning. I want to see Utah get away from this, just reelect the incumbents, let them slide back into office easily without very much of a fight at all. It's not healthy. It's producing, I think, a lethargic and arrogant legislature. They're not responding to voters' wishes. They're not taking care of the things voters put as a priority. Nancy mentioned this. We've talked about it on the show before, but the Utah Foundation, this is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that has been around for decades, and their entire reason for existing is to do research, put it together in nice, fancy reports and visualizations that are easy to digest, and then put them out there for lawmakers and the public to look at. And they hope, they say, to, just to have better informed public policy debates. And they've done research on water policy, tax policy. Well, recently, they did a survey of voters here in Utah, and they surveyed a couple of thousand people who voted in the last election. And they asked them some simple questions. One of those questions was, what is your biggest concern right now in Utah when it comes to public policy, the legislature, the governor's office, the government, basically? What is your biggest concern? The top concern for 82%, top concern for 82% of the respondents, of thousands of respondents in this Utah Foundation survey, said the legislature not listening was their top concern when it came to public policy here in Utah. That doesn't happen by accident. That isn't a fluke. You don't have a majority that large in a sample size that large respond that way unless it is really a problem in your state. So again, lawmakers will often say, hey, if you don't like what we do, vote us out. I don't necessarily think it needs to come to that. I don't think here in Cache Valley, for example, we need to boot everyone in office right now and pick new people necessarily. I mean, it's fine if we do, but I don't think it requires that to right this ship. But I think more incumbents in general in the legislature being kept on their toes at very least by primaries, if not a viable challenge in the actual general election, which, again, I don't think that starts to happen for another 10 years at least outside of Salt Lake County. But we could see these primaries happen immediately. It's surprisingly a controversial opinion to express. People get very, what? Because you're basically saying, if you support primaries, if you urge people to run to primary incumbents, the incumbents take it as you saying they aren't good at the job and they need to be booted from office. Maybe, but what I'm really saying is that this is healthy for everybody. A primary keeps people on their toes. Congressman Blake Moore, probably one of the most this is a person, his position right now, although he does have a general election challenger in the form of a Democratic candidate, Bill Campbell, Congressman Moore could probably not say a thing, sit back, barely campaign from here on out. He's still going to be reelected. It's Utah. It's a red state. He's the Republican. He knows that. But he's still campaigning. And he said recently at their debate, at the post-debate Q&A, he said he actually kind of enjoyed being primary. He had a primary opponent during the GOP primary as well that wrapped up in June. And he said he kind of enjoyed it a little bit because he says it keeps you on your toes. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you thinking. It reminds you that you need to, as best you can, have the pulse of the people on your mind. And he said when you're out there for weeks at a time in Washington, D.C., that is something that's easy to forget. I think the same thing happens with our state lawmakers. When you're surrounded by lobbyists, even though the session is only 45 days, and other than interim sessions once a month, they go back to their day jobs, which I think is a good part of having a part-time legislature, that they have day jobs, that they're not full-time lawmakers. Even then, I've seen it myself, and I've had lawmakers tell me, you can get lost in that world. You can get siloed in that world and forget maybe you're not the smartest people in the room on certain issues. Maybe others you are, because you've been exposed to information that regular voters aren't privy to. But there are some issues where voters are going to know more than you. There are also times when voters are going to change their mind and want something different. And if you don't know that's happened, you're a bad representative. That's an actual quote from a state lawmaker that I'll never forget. And unfortunately, that person is no longer in office. They retired. But I would prefer more lawmakers in the legislature thinking that way. So if it takes scaring them with primaries, then by all means, let's do it. But either way, we've got to be plugged in. And so this is my final pitch here for you to fill out your ballot. Regardless of what registered party affiliation you have, your political ideology, right, left, center, it doesn't matter. The more of us voting and weighing in, the easier it will be to reel the legislature back in and say, hey, you're one branch of three and you work for us. But we've got to vote in numbers higher than we've been voting. We'll be back right after this.
Fatigue, headaches, weight gain, hair loss, insomnia, anxiety, intestinal issues, joint pain. Do you suffer from consistent symptoms like these, and no matter how many doctors you see, things still don't improve? Whether you have a thyroid problem, an autoimmune issue, or chronic symptoms, we can help. We do complex medical testing and blood work to find the mechanisms driving your symptoms. And then we create a plan to improve each one while we teach you the tools to stay on top of your health. We've been helping patients just like you for almost 14 years now. We see patients from all over the world, and we have an office here in St. George, Logan, Salt Lake, Farmington, and Springville. You aren't crazy, you aren't lazy. It's not just because you're getting older, and these symptoms are not normal. No matter what symptoms you have, you shouldn't feel this way, and we can help. Don't accept Band-Aid answers.
Call Red River Health and Wellness at 855-55-RIVER.
Call Red River today.
This is Misty Hewitt, Chief Program Officer at CAPSA. At CAPSA, you matter. To every survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault, I want you to know you matter. At CAPSA, we see you, we believe you, and we're here to help. Whether you're in an unsafe relationship or carrying the trauma of past abuse, you matter to us. CAPSA is a place where you are valued and supported. You're not alone. Learn more about CAPSA and how you matter at capsa.org.
I'm Nancy Huntley, and I'm running for Utah Senate District 2 in Cache and Rich counties. We live in divisive times, but our differences shouldn't divide us. Let's get back to a time when neighbors could disagree and still help each other with the harvest. I will listen to everyone, conservative or liberal, Republican or Democrat, and work with you for the future of northern Utah. I ask you to vote for Nancy Huntley on your November ballot. Paid for by Nancy for Utah.
Hi, my name is Linda Christiansen, the County Clerk for Sanpete County. You might be wondering, is Utah's ballot process safe? The answer is yes. From signature verification to tabulation and storage, each ballot received is always handled by a minimum of 2 certified election officials for ballot processing. If you want to learn more about Utah election security, visit vote.utah.gov.
Saturday, the Aggies host New Mexico on Merlin Olsen Field.
I mean, realistically, we can win every single game out. There's not a doubt in my mind and our players' minds, but we could also lose every game. It all depends on the mindset in that locker room.
KVNU is your home for the best game coverage, with pregame at noon, kickoff at 2, and postgame and Aggie Call immediately after the game. It's the Aggies and the Lobos, Saturday afternoon on News Talk KVNU, the heritage home for the Aggies.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Be sure to be with us tomorrow. Interesting debate taking shape on Capitol Hill over federal proposals to raise the retirement age. This has become a part of the presidential campaign debate, but Utah lawmakers weighing in on this, and a varied collection of opinions from Republicans and Democrats alike. So we'll talk about that tomorrow on the show, and of course the For the People movie show following that in hour 2 of tomorrow's show. Wrapping things up here with a little Halloween movie trivia. This was an interesting thing that popped up. If you haven't seen it, well, I'm not going to recommend it. It's an acquired taste. If you're not into slasher horror movies, you're not going to be. But one of the most famous scary movies that gets recycled on the streaming services now every year is Scream, the original movie made in the mid-'90s by famous and now sadly late director Wes Craven. And it was a horror movie. It was a slasher film. No one stayed for the credits. But he did something kind of interesting in the credits, and one Utah school was included in this. In the credits, because this is a high school themed movie, they're all high school students, although most of the actors were actually in their mid to late 20s. They were playing high school students. And Wes Craven in the credits gave shout outs to high schools that he'd had, in his life some involvement with, either as a student directly or a filming location or just having a relative in the school, which is how one Utah high school got mentioned. The shout-outs would read something like, in the credits you can see, "No thanks whatsoever to the Santa Rosa City School District Governing Board." And that was actually a joke because they actually filmed much of Scream there. And the governing board was the one to sign off on that. So, but West High in Utah is mentioned of Scream. And Craven said one of the reasons West High in Utah in Salt Lake City got a mention is that he had actually toured West High as a potential film location for the Scream movie. And the only reason he decided not to film here was that the studio wouldn't ship all of their gear at the week that the school was going to be available for filming. So we just missed out on being the location for that iconic mid-'90s horror classic Scream. But West High and Utah still got a shout-out in the credits. They move fast, so you'll have to look for them. But next time you're watching the film, check it out. Utah gets a mention. I didn't